Oh, guys and girls, Emma again. Welcome back to the new workshop. This is a tentative attempt to post some Patreon video because you guys have been such a great support, and I haven't had anything much for a little while because the Stuart 400 has some carburetor issues I can't sort out. Anyway, I wanted to do this. I think it's probably the best thing we can do now, because this small selection of castings was the last lot I bought from AJ Reeves, and they come in a big box with some other bits as well. And I made some progress on them. I put some bits apart together. I've got all the horn blocks on both sides. These frames were laser cut, and I've put them together, and I've got the spring castings in place. And basically I've machined the buffer beams for the end, and I've got these are all set up nice and square and flat, and it's got dusty, but there's a few jobs to do on it, and we've got enough bits, I think, to, without spending any more money on this, to get this tender part of this Princess Marina build actually up and running. So, state of play, we've got these castings that were in a box that we haven't assembled yet. Are the wheels, the axle blocks, and there's some smoke box bits. So there's a saddle, there's smoke box ring for the front, and there's a smoke box lid or a door. Some idea of the size of it, and we've got a chimney. So they were bits that I included because I had enough money. To be honest, this box of stuff here, I spent about $1,000, and that included this Australian brass for the tender base and some angle iron for support or attaching it to this, and to run basically along the side for strengthening ribs, just to tidy it all up. A couple of lengths of silver steel for axles. The pieces for the buffers, so there's the 4-spring buffer standards and the heads. There's a pump, hand pump for the tender. And there's a centric to drive the lubricator, which isn't as yet fitted, and I'm not sure I'm actually going to use this casting when we do it. But lubricator's on. That's where we're at with Princess Marina and the bits that need to be done. Let's have a look at the locomotive. Now, so far, I've done quite a lot of work on this, including getting it half cleaned up. We take the cap off the steam inlet. This thing turns over a lot better. Put it in full gear. Everything's oiled up and nice. So what I've done, I put these plugs in the top here for timing, because it's a bit of a cow, I think, to time actually, and 2 plugs in each cylinder certainly made a difference there, because you can actually see the valve on the ports. If we turn this around, I've made an oiler and assembled it, put it here. It's ratchet drive, and that all works beautifully. This has a lever off here onto this eccentric. And I believe that this casting here is supposed to be on here, but it's not really ideal, so we might just use a bit of gunmetal sheet, or we might cast something ourselves, because this hole in here is actually bigger than the eccentric. So yeah, if you split it and clean it up, it might clean up, but there's a chance it won't. So we'll think about it. That's actually a axle pump casting eccentric, I think. Eccentric strap. So There's some of the jobs I've done. I've also sorted out the compensating on the front axle so it actually works on the spring system here rather than just hanging off, which was a bit of a problem. So this is actually supporting a bit. I think I've got that fixed. I've had the valve gear off a couple of times. I ended up sorting this out because connecting rods here were touching on the slides, and that was not quite correct. So whoever had done this work before had basically just put it all together, and that was the state of play with it. And when I bought it, it needed a bit of work. So the wheels have all been corded, it's all been cleaned up. It runs pretty nice on air, and it's ready for some bits. At some point, the next part of this build, or this part of the locomotive, will be a smoke box saddle and a smoke box tube, and to give you some idea, a smoke box door, and a chimney. So that'll make it quite a lot more imposing than it actually is, and a fair bit heavier, and then we can go ahead and put the boiler on it. But at this point that's not going to happen. I've got this basically sitting on the workbench here because I've got a clean workshop. Well, I've got a clean workbench, and that's actually, if we have a look, it's not going to last, and it hasn't lasted. But we've got locomotive here, we've got the tender here, and current state, we've got the drawings over there, we've got castings there, and that's all that's on the workbench, which is amazing. So without any further ado, we'll have a look at the drawings. We'll see what needs to be done next, and we'll start thinking about machining some axle boxes, I think, or some wheels or some axles or something. Anyway, drawings. We've got six pages of drawings. This stuff here has all been made. This is your axle boxes, front and back buffer beams, and horn stays, and frames. There's a general arrangement there, which gives you some idea what the locomotives are going to look like, I hope, one day. Probably in someone else's lifetime, but we'll make some progress with it. Drawing 2 is cylinders, steam chests, or front and back covers, pony bolster buffers for springs, we've got all that sorted, slide valve, steam chests, axle pumps, pony truck, driving wheels, main frame, spacers, things like that, guide bars, glands, that sort of thing. All that's been done, so there's a lot of hard work out of the way there. So we'll fold that drawing up. Drawing 3 is valve gear mostly. We've got our reverse shaft and arm. We've got reach rods. Check from job, it says. That's all done. Valve gear setup, union links, crossheads, lifting arms, radius rods, reverse shafts, guide yokes, link brackets, pistons, rods, combination levers, expansion links, etc, 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 crossheads, conrods. So that's all done too, and it does tick over pretty nicely. It's good to have a reference in the drawing, but someone else has done the hard work and I've just fine-tuned it. Drawing 4 we're going to put aside because this is boiler build. The lubricator's up the top, we've already done that. There's hollow stays and blower valves. There's steam and exhaust connections, which are all done. There's a regulator, safety valve, sniffing valve, top feed, clack, grate, ash band, and backhead fittings. A lot of work in this drawing, but at this point it's going to happen sometime in the future. Drawing 5 is the same. We're going to put this aside. There's tender brake rigging, brake block hangers, steam cylinders, steam brakes, pipe connections, injectors, brake shaft for the tender, smoke box connections, pipe plumbing, tender connections on the rear beam, cab front and sides, plate work, smoke box saddle, that sort of stuff. So let's go on the side too. And that brings us to sheet 6, which is the only one left. And this is the tender. Now these were laser cut, so that's easy. We've got that sorted. We've got buffers here, how to put them together. Tender buffers and front buffers are a little bit different, but the information's there. We can go ahead with that. We've got information for the pump, which we've got we've got a lot of the bits for. We can go ahead with that at some point. But if we fold this over, well, we've got axle boxes here and we've got horn stays, pretty straightforward bits. If we fold this over, we've got axles and wheels. Now, that's where we're at with this, axles and wheels. So there's 3/8 silver steel, 10mm silver steel, whatever. I've got 10mm ream and I've got 10mm silver steel. I think I bought metric. These are 1/4 inch on the ends to go in the axle boxes. Their wheels are Loctite fit, and they've got to be the right space apart. Not a lot of information when you start looking at actual details on this drawing. There's not much information here. So we've got a book, which is basically the information from the magazine articles. And if we go through here to the tender, and read Curly's writings on this, it says that Princess Marina's tender is particularly is a particularly scale copy of the 3,500 gallon tenders attached to her big sisters. It has an ample coal space, and in the small addition it allows plenty of room for a fire, the little engine when riding the car behind the tender, and leaves the foot-based fittings accessible. It's very easy to build. We'll see about that. The 2 side frames are cut from 1/8 soft-rolled steel, overall length being 15 5/8 and depth 2 1/4. We've done that. We took the easy way out there. The horn checks are castings and merely cleaned up with a file to move it to the frames. I usually jam a bit of square rod in the opening to the frame and run a casting up to it and fix it with a tool anchor's clamp and poke the drill straight through the casting and frame. Done that. 332 charcoal iron rivets, round heads outside, countersunk inside, will be suitable for permanent attachment. I didn't countersink them because I missed that word, but they look pretty tidy. So, the usual idea is to cast dummy leaf springs with real spiral spring hidden in the buckle and the hoop as shown in the general arrangement. We've still got to drill the holes for them, but we'll look at that pretty soon. Nothing to prevent anyone who cares to take the trouble to fit real working leaf springs, and then from the instructions given may be followed. Commercial clock spring steel being used and the rough handling is the former types more suitable. Our advertiser sells castings require very little in the way of cleaning up. Well, that's what I found. Anyway, a 1/4 inch hole is drilled in the underside of the hoop and nearly 2/3 of the way through to accommodate the spiral spring, which is made from 20 gauge steel music wire. The axle boxes are castings. The front face, which has a dummy axle box lid cast in it, should not need any more attention than a rub with a file cleaning brush. The groove 5/8 full wide is milled in each side of the box, starting from 1/16 of an inch behind the front face, and the depth of the groove should be such that the axle box will slide freely between the horns without being sloppy. Failing a regular milling machine, they can be milled by clamping them on the sides under the lathe tool holder and then traversing across a 5/8 end mill held in a chuck. Let's have a look at these. So this is them, 3 each side. Right. They've got doors or whatever on the front of them. This isn't going to be a Nigel Taylor style build. It's going to be very much a Lillian Lawrence words of music build. So I guess the thing to do, I've cleaned these up a little bit, is they've got a bit of slop on them. I think the thing to do is to grip these in the mill, clean them up sideways so they're to size, put a slot down each side, and probably split them and then drill and ream them for ream the 2 holes in them. If we have a look at this, it's probably the best. There's a hole goes through here, 1/4 inch diameter, full it says, so reamed or a running fit, I guess, on the axle. It's 11/16 of an inch deep. You've got the 9/16. The book says 5/8, but this says 9/16. We're going to measure that from the job. Groove down each side to fit in between the frames, and we've got a spring hole for the spring in the top. So these are 13/16 of an inch long. The hole's 9/16 down from one end. So have a look. There seems to be plenty of room to clean these up. Let's get through and clean these up nicely to, gosh, should say 13/16 wide, and have a look at them then. Without any further ado, let's go across the milling machine. So we've got one side cleaned up here. Now, the drawing says 13/16, but we're going to ignore that because it's not quite as simple as that. If we have a look at this casting, this detail on the front is about 7/8, which is 62 thou wider than it really would be nice to be, according to the drawing. Now, I'm not going to reshape these or mess around with the Dremel and get them right or anything like that. It's not going to happen. So what I'm going to do is just trim these up just till they clean up, and so that they all look the same on that side. And then we're going to measure them and find the centre, and we're going to make the grooves to fit. It won't matter if the flanges are a little bit wider. So that gives us our detail on both sides. You see, it's not quite even or anything else, and I've just set this up on a parallel across here, so it's cleaned up a bit more on one corner than the other, and hopefully when we turn it over it should be nice. So that's what we're doing. If we have a look here with the mirror, that's very, very close to cleaned up, nice there. It could do with probably another, I think we're probably going to take 10-20 thou off it again. It looks like front to back it really wants to clean up to about 3/4. Put that on there, there's plenty of room there, so don't need to worry about that. The most important thing at this stage is the cosmetic on the front, so I'm going to take another 10 thou off there. We've got that set up on the DRO. We're currently about 40 thou off overall. We can crank that up to 50, I think. 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 498, 50 thou. Clamp that down, and then we can take another cut through here. cutter speed in this stuff's about 70, 80 RPM. It's pretty good. And we can do that in 2 cuts on this cutter. I could have found a wider cutter, but bit of a precursory sort of a look and didn't, so this will do us nicely. But that cutter's cutting that gunmetal pretty nice. It's probably a little bit ferocious, but I think it'll be alright. Don't yet have a good system for holding this vise down. We're going to need to work on that at some point. It's one of those mill jobs that I've promised to do, but hasn't really happened yet. So we're right through. We'll turn him off. And I might have a bit of a look at this with a mirror and slip him out and trim all 4 sides on both, or 2 sides and both of them up nicely, and then probably going to flip them over and we're going to trim them to 3/4 thick, and then we'll have a bit more of a look. Well guys, there's the last cut on the sides. They're both down to 7/8 of an inch, which is a lot more work than it really felt like it was going to be. Taking 1/10 out of cut with this machine because this stuff's pretty tough, really. But they're both 875 thou wide, and they both clean up nicely on the edges of these details on the front. So they're both parallel and square to the front edge, I hope. They're certainly close enough. Next thing I've really got to work out is how I set this up and machine this down to 3/4 of an inch from there to there. And when I've got that, then we can start thinking about putting some grooves in them to match the horn cheeks on the tender frame. So these are getting there. There's a bit more work in them yet, probably a lot more work. So there's about 3 days work in making these 6 little pieces. And I really wasn't expecting that, but maybe I'm losing touch. Maybe there's just more work in things than you always think. Maybe this is really hard material. Maybe my cutter's blunt, but I seem to be pretty slow with this, but it's the material, I think. Anyway, tomorrow, work out what to do. So that's going to do me for tonight. It's getting a bit late. So there we go. That's the 3rd side of both of them down to size. This mill has tiny little hand wheels on it, and it's pretty hard work. I would like at some point to put like 4 or 5 inch hand wheels on it, just to halve the load rather than these little 3-inch ones, because your hands work pretty hard, and I sort of, if I'm doing any reasonable amount of milling, leather welding glove is what happens with this, but it still makes my hands pretty sore. So at some point I'll find some nice modern 5-inch, 6-inch, something like that, ergonomic hand wheels to go on there, at least make this a little bit more. So I've been reading through this book a bit while I had smoko. There's a fair bit of information covered in no particular depth, which is a problem. So you've got to go to other LBSC writings to get anything more than that. However, we've got these nice and square 4 sides, I hope. They're 3/4 of an inch thick that way, and they're 7/8 of an inch thick that way. They just clean up with these in the centre nicely. Pretty happy with that. So next job really is to put a groove down each side, and according to the drawing it's 9/16 of an inch wide and 332 deep, but it's not really, because if we have a look at this, these are about 550. I was going to mill these, but I've ended up cleaning up just with a file, and I think that's plenty good enough. These have got to have a bit of axial movement in them, so they want to be reasonably loose. This wants to work with one of these down here and one of these up here, and the wheel axle still want to spin, so it's a fair bit of movement. So these want to slide in there nicely like that, so that the slots are a bit thicker than that. The slots are a bit deeper than that, and probably not quite as wide. This keeping the bench clean thing is not working out well for me. These are all been sorted out with a gauge block to be pretty close to 625 or 5/8 of an inch. That is, make up that gauge block stack that is 5/8 of an inch. That's a good snug fit in there. So that's roughly what they are, and they're all pretty much exactly the same. Some of them are probably 625, some of them are probably still 624. Some of them might have a little bit of rust on them. So it's just a matter at this point of sketching this up so that it looks like it's actually going to work. And coming in 3/32 of an inch there, putting the right size groove in each side, down each side parallel, so I'm going to have to tram the vise up. And when we've got those in, we can part them, make them into 3 pieces, and put 3 holes in them, which is still a bit of work involved in this. There really is. Anyway, let's get on with it. So there's a colossal amount of work in these for a couple of reasons. One, they're gunmetal, and for two, they sort of all need to be hand fitted. I've got these working pretty good actually. They're not bad. When I get holes in the back of them for axles, and they've got to be trimmed to length, they're much shorter than this when they're done. Machine to length, holes in the back, the axles in, then they've got to have a bit of lateral here. Then they've got to have, when I get holes in the back, and they've still got to be trimmed to length because they're way too long yet, but they've still got to have some sort of lateral movement this way on your axles, so that when this one's right at the top of the travel and this one's right at the bottom, the axle still spins and they don't jam up. So there's still a fair bit of work involved in getting that right. And the only real way to make that work is to do it by hand. But I've got slots in these, and I've got the 3 of them fitting half reasonable. That one's good, this one's good, this one's got a tight spot in it, but it's a work in progress. It's probably on the top here, I would say, and if we give that a rub with a file, we'll probably fix it. Probably also a fraction tight in the back there. Let's fix that. So still to go is to put slots in these, and cut them to length. I used the bandsaw to cut these to length, which is awesome. I actually broke the blade cutting it because I turned the speed right down and I didn't realise. So I found another blade that come with the bandsaw, and thanks to all you guys for that. And swapped it over and cut these to length. So next job really tomorrow, and I probably should finish these bits before I move on, and I really can't wait to start machining wheels, but is to, while the mill's still set up, is to put slots in these the same as this side. Get all these in the way, trim them to length and put some holes in them for bearings and springs, and these bits will start to look like they're finished, but there's at least another day's work and probably 2 days work in doing this. So anyway, I'm going to call this video finished. It's getting a bit long, but we have made some progress, and thanks to all you guys for your support again. It's certainly coming together. There's a bit of weight in this by the time you get all these castings in here, and then some silver steel and some brass, and it's going to weigh a fair bit. But anyway, thanks for your support. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're ever watching this on YouTube, and more soon, guys and girls. Be kind to each other.